Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavati Tamastu Mavit Vishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we're looking at the caste system, which is very different than is often misconstrued as birthright, and it's very different from the class system, since it's based on the subtle body, your thoughts, your temperament, not birthright. And that's where it goes wrong in society, and it's generally being abused. People think that it's their birthright to be perhaps a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaisya, Shudra, and in which case pocketed in that area and then don't actually get out of it, and they're actually not that. So the whole idea of this system was so that you evolved using your temperaments, whatever they may be. So you're best placed to evolve in that situation. And each person has a mixture of different percentage of sattva, rajas, and tamas. And depending on that, you are best suited to pursue a particular activity. And it's not that they don't go one from another. It's just that your predominance may be in one area. So we were looking at the Brahmana last week, and the Brahmana's percentage of sattva. This is not Brahmana by birthright. I keep emphasizing this because it's so misused and become almost redundant and abusive, the system. But in its actual, its relevance, its actual meaning, actual practice, it's something very refined. So a Brahmana, somebody who has, we're just perhaps to term it or coin it, a Brahmana is somebody who has perhaps 80% sattva, minimum maybe 15% rajas, and a small percentage of tamas. And then a Kshatriya, somebody, the sattva drops. So say we could perhaps perceive it to be 20% sattva, 70% rajas, and 10% tamas. And then further, the society generally that we live in is Vaisyas and Shudras currently. It's less Kshatriya and less Brahmana in our current setup. And perhaps that would be something like 15% sattva, 60% for a Vaisya, 60% rajas, 25% maybe tamas, and increasing in the Shudra of 5% sattva, 10% perhaps rajas, and a large percentage of tamas, in the sense that that thinking capacity, or that capacity to mentally operate, it's more based on the physical, if anything. So this is just a broad outline. You can't hold it as such. I'm just giving you so you get a feel for it. So there's an understanding of it. So we were saying last week that the if you can just imagine a whole society where it was sattvic, where the givers gave what was needed, there was no need. The exchanges, the distribution was done with an understanding. So you see what's needed and you do it. You don't wait for it to be asked for or done. You just do it. So, and also similarly, you have whatever you need. So that whole distribution system is thought through and looked after. The thinking is on that original thinking of the higher values. So the focus is always on the truth, the self, the Atman, Brahman, whatever you want to call it, that universal value. So that's what makes it sattvic. That's what makes the Brahmana. They're a thinker. They're mentally orientated before they act. There was the different qualities we looked at last week in terms of a Brahmana. So it was control at the mental level, self-control. So they standardize, they have a middle path, not too much, not too little, engage in the world, but it's very tempered. They're able to enjoy to the maximum because they're able to have that self-control where they end perception with perception. There's no rush, worry, and anxiety. Tapaha, they have that austerity to channelize their energies to the higher. Socham, there's a purity. They're internally, maybe you start externally, internally, you're cleaning your vasanas in terms of the negative attitudes. So it starts from an outside environment, goes within to the mental, physical levels. Gangshati, there's a forgiveness is not like you belittle the other person and that you're better. It's just an understanding that that's where they're. You have to forgive, to let go of something for your own growth. It's nothing to do with the other person, really. So if you're great, you can't afford to not understand another person's position. You let go. You just leave it at that. So there's an empathy rather than a sympathy. You envisage the lacuna of another at that point in time, whereas you may have many lacunas. Arjavan, straightforwardness, no selfish interest. Jnanam and vijnanam, knowledge and wisdom. This person's sharpening themselves up with knowledge so that they can digest that knowledge in their reflection in their early hours to make it wisdom. So they're committed to that unfoldment of the self. Asidakam, faith. The faith isn't blind faith, it's considering all the facts. Then you project an idea, a hypothesis, and you work on that with a consistency of purpose. So it's not just blind. It's not just emotional. It's got a bit of an intellect backing it. So that's the idea of a Brahmana. Now we're going on to look at who's a Kshatriya. In fact, did we read the commentary? I think we read the commentary of that. Vidya's saying yes, Tim's saying no. I think we did it too. Tim, I think we read it. You sure? Anybody else?
We talked about it, but we didn't read it.
Oh, God.
Vidya probably knows.
What? Anybody else remember reading it? My gosh, what the memories are. I feel that we've done it, but anybody else dispute that? Did we do or did we not do it? Sam, where are you? Did we do or not?
Honestly, I can't remember, but just read it again.
It doesn't hurt to reread again.
Chalo, let's read again. Isha,
Chant
let's go.
42.
Yes.
समोधमस्तपः शौचं शान्तिर्आर्जवमेव च Jnanam vijnanamastikhyam brahma karma swabhavajam.
Isha, if you could read the
Verse 42.
Mhm.
Serenity, self-restraint, austerity, purity, forgiveness, uprightness, also knowledge, wisdom, and faith are characteristic of Brahmana born of his nature. The nature of a Brahmana priest class is predominantly sattvic. His characteristics are enumerated in the verse. Shama, serenity. The mind remains calm and composed when it is under control of the intellect, unperturbed by the senses, free from sensual thought. Dharma, self-restraint. With mind under control, the body does not plunge into indiscriminate sensual indulgence. It observes self-control. Tapa, austerity. Exercising control of mind and body, a Brahmana lives an austere life. He conserves energy otherwise dissipating into unproductive channels in the world and directs it towards spiritual evolution. Saucham, purity. A Brahmana maintains purity at all levels, a clean environment, fit and healthy body, chaste emotion, divine thought.
Gankshati, forgiveness.
Say again, how do you pronounce it?
Gankshati.
Gankshati, forgiveness. Manifests with growth in stature, like an adult looking at the pettiness of a child. A Brahmana of great maturity regards others with forgiveness for their childish involvement in the world. Arjavam, uprightness. Being straightforward, a Brahmana lives a noble life, with no selfish interest in the mundane world, free from a false life. Jnanam, knowledge, and Vijnanam, wisdom. The words chaiva and even are introduced before the next three traits: Jnanam, knowledge, Vijnanam, wisdom, and Astikam, faith. They seem to indicate additional qualities of a class of Brahmanas committed to spiritual unfoldment. Jnanam here refers to knowledge of self, Vijnanam to actual application and experience of the knowledge. These Brahmanas not only possess knowledge but live it through life. Astikam, faith, is also a prerequisite for spiritual evolution, a firm belief in the unknown reality until one comes to know it. With such faith and conviction alone can one progress to enlightenment. A Brahmana seeker has the faith. The above characteristics of a Brahmana spring from his own divine nature, vasanas, acquired by past action. As long as his vasanas last, the traits manifest themselves.
So in the terms of a Brahmana, all these are at the mental level and then percolate into the physical, the emotional, but they're all at the, it's a thinker, essentially. A thinker who doesn't do nothing, a thinker who actually practices that in their life in every way. So such a thinker is always one who looks at the interest of the whole, who looks at the interest of others because they can afford to, because they're quite settled in their minds. Brahmana. 43 comes to a Kshatriya.
May I ask a quick question about the last, just a short last paragraph? It says, as long as his vasanas last, the traits manifest themselves. I'm not sure what are traits here.
So traits as in the sattvic, rajasic, tamasic
Okay.
traits. So whatever the vasanas. You see, even in the Brahmana, it's not 100% sattva. There'll be elements of, when you sleep, it's tamas in a sense. When you, so there are certain things which are rajasic, tamasic, and sattvic, but his predominance is sattvic. If it's 99% sattvic, it's trans sattva. So you're already just at that stage. Actually, you're not in, you're just transcending to self, basically. So there isn't such thing as 100% sattvic. So as long as you're in this embodiment, you'll have sattva, rajas, tamas of some proportion. In terms of the Brahmana, it's pretty much, the predominance.
So there are gradations or levels or degrees within the priesthood. So those who have reached self-realization, for example, would have no sattvic or rajasic, or perhaps in this context, rajasic and tamasic traits, but those in lower degrees would have more predominance, obviously in sattvika, but still have lingering or sattvika or rajasic, sattvic, sorry, rajasic, tamasic qualities still lingering perhaps a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolute, if you cross over, there's no gunas, there's no trait, there's no qualities left. If you're a Christ-like figure, you don't have sattva, rajas, tamas going on, in a sense. People might see different things because they have your own reflection of your own gunas. Yeah? One projects on another person one's own gunas. So it's not easy to see if somebody's sattvic, rajas. So really just forget about seeing what somebody else is. See what you are, elevate that, refine that. It's often said, don't take the personality of a teacher or a master, just take the knowledge. That's all our interest in. Because we don't really know what's going on in their heads or whatever. And really, it's not worth it. It's really worth getting on to your own evolution. And that's where you can look within and see what you've got to do.
Thank you.
There'll always be, yeah. So, good. Let's go. 43.
Sauryam tejodhritirdakshyam yuddhe chapi apalayanam dhanam ishvara bhavascha shatram karma swabhavajam.
Peter, if you'd like to read.
Prowess, splendor, steadfastness, dexterity, and also not fleeing from battle, charity and lordliness are characteristic of Kshatriya, born of his nature.
So he's got a whole lot of qualities which are quite charismatic. In the Kshatriya's case, it's the sattva drops quite a lot, but there's still the rajasic, the shades of grey of that rajasic trait of that momentum, that movement, that action, in fact. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita's basing the whole philosophy upon a set of Kshatriyas. So they are full of prowess, bravery. They fight for a cause. On this case, Kauravas and Pandavas are fighting on opposite sides, righteous and righteous. They just fight. Their stamina, they've got the capacity to fight for a cause. So when they're fighting in that sense, their understanding is that they're refining their rajas. So that's their qualities. So whatever status you're at, you're refining that. So there's a charismatic stance in be the person who gets up and says something and does it. They won't shy away from whatever needs to be said or fought for. They've got that valor. Good or bad, they'll fight for it if they believe in that cause. Lordliness, they've got that lordly quality, that there's a presence about them that others will follow and look up to, and in a pure way, and will also serve them because they have that grand standing to fight. But the difference between a Brahmana is a thinker and then acts. A Kshatriya is an active person less of a thinker. They have that, but less of a thinker. They have the cause and then they go for it. They don't think it through enough. Hence why our dear fellow Arjuna is on the battlefield collapsing. He's not thinking, it's gone from his head. But yet he's got that valor in him and gallantry. Steadfast. They don't give up easily. They take upon a cause and pursue it right to the end. I've seen that actually in people that I know in India, like, I don't know if they're Kshatriya, but they come from certain parts where India is sort of like, actually is just watching, maybe it's wrong to say, but just watching some Punjabi friends who are really fighters that take up the cause. I'm just talking about the ones I've known in India. Take up the cause, right, go to the end, look at it in every possible way and fight to the end. And very practically orientated. Nothing phases them. Whereas you might think, oh, maybe let's just somebody else get on with it. They don't get phased about it. They've got that conviction. They've got that generosity. They give, even if they don't have it in their pocket to give. I've seen that in one or two people where they don't have anything in their pocket to give, but they have that charitable disposition because from generations to generations, rightly or wrongly, they've been in that community where it's to serve the cause and give. So they'll find a way to do that, even if they don't have it in their pocket, because they know that's the right thing to do. So they'll well put themselves before, put somebody else before themselves. They've got that stamina to, after you sort of thing, let the person have it well before they will think to have. There's a very refined, subtle emotional quality in there. As much as there's a soft emotional quality, there's a hard stamina to fight for a cause. It's very interesting to see that those qualities in individuals when you see it. I don't know how to explain it. You see it. It's very hard when it comes to a cause. They'll pursue it right to the end. But when you see them very soft and gentle natured, when you speak to them, you almost think they'd be really timid to go and fight. But when it comes to it, out it comes like roaring lion. Actually, when I've been in Punjab, I've seen certain qualities of characteristics. I remember, this is a little bit less, it's not direct, but I remember going through Punjab on a train. We were going to Chandigarh, and there was about 30 of us on a train going for lectures, for Swamiji's lectures. And at the station, maybe 5 or 6, I don't know if you say Punjabi, came with the whole dress, talwar. Talwar means big long sword, and you look quite frightening. And then when they realized there was 30 of us on the train, they decided that they would protect us on that journey. And when you talk to them, they're so gentle-mannered and soft and shared everything that they had and we shared with them. They're very, very gentle-mannered and very softly spoken. I mean, you can't tell their character from within, but when you see them, I'm just giving the external traits. Maybe that's wrong to give. I don't know how to actually explain the traits from within when you meet such people, just giving example. Let's read it anyway. But they fight for cause. They'll get up. They won't, if something's not right, you recognize it. They'll be the ones to get up and say, no, this is not okay. They won't sit quiet. They'll fight
The
that
verse
battle.
details the characteristics of Kshatriya warrior class. Shauryam, prowess. A Kshatriya possesses valor, bravery, gallantry. Tejaha, splendor. Vital and bright, glorious and majestic in action. Dhritirya, firmness, devoted and determined in the execution of his duty and responsibility. Firm and consistent. Dakshyam, dexterity. Skillful, expert. Deft and prompt in decision and action. Dynam, charity. Generous in disposition, ready to help, share, give, arising from nobility. Ishvara bhavaha, lordliness, princely, in a commanding position, a trait opposed to subservience. The above qualities are expressions of a Kshatriya's vasanas, inherent nature.
Mm. So if you just examine one aspect of it, there's less of sattva, there's more of rajas, but they have all these qualities in the worldly sense. So they're less focused on getting to the self. They've got more action. They've got vasanas which promote their action. So they've got to get through that in order to clear the, what do you call it, their plate. So they become more introverted. So they're, in a sense, extroverted in a refined manner. They understand what they got to do. They still use their mind, perhaps in the worldly sense. But once that's cleared, it's very open to getting onto that thinking, that evolution, spiritual evolution. So they're well on their way in as well. They're clear of what they're doing in the worldly sense. Skillful, dexterous, they have those qualities. Bhagavad, generous. So in a worldly sense, let's go. Sam.
It's a quick one. Just thinking about it, I think that our society would need people like this that would fit into this quality. Just because I'm just thinking for the sake of the day-to-day and running of society and things, you know, we would need people who possess these qualities, because if everyone was a Brahmana, I don't think that the society would function as well as it should. So we do need people who are more action-orientated, who are more worldly, for example, politicians, or for example, warriors or things. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a society that would be able to run. So we do need people who are going to be charitable and skillful and be in commanding positions to make orders. So I feel that they would, it is good that there are people of this quality. Otherwise, society wouldn't run without such qualities of such people.
So the material society we're talking about. So
Yeah.
spiritual society actually would encompass the material. So the Brahmanas would encompass that. So it would run better if there were more Brahmanas. Brahmanas are not sitting there doing nothing. They're executing stuff. That's the mistake. But the Kshatriyas are materially orientated, so they're full of rajasic action. So yes, it's far better than the society now to have Kshatriyas, to be honest. You're right. But society right now is Vaisyas and Shudras, which we're coming to. So it's a cut above the Vaisyas and Shudras. But just having action at its refined sense without thinking properly will calm the whole lot down, but it won't make it where thinkers are givers, really.
I'm just thinking, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a step above, you're right. It's a step above. We need to get acting in a more refined manner, chivalrous manner, be skillful, dexterous, all that sort of thing. But that's only to up your sattva, because if everybody was sattvic, it would clearly eradicate that sense of, and it's a sense of, you see, we can't conceive it because we're actually in a yuga age where everything is self-interest. Yeah. So this steps it up a bit. So we can't, it's like almost having a ceiling that we can't conceive what Raj Sattva would be like if it was all Sattvic. We can consider mostly if it was a Rajasic society at its best, which means action, skillful action. We can't consider, can you consider if everything was fairly distributed? When I have something, it's in everybody's interest for me to distribute and share it fully. When you have something, you see a need where I have it. You don't ask me, do you need it? You make sure you've done it. That's your obligation. So that's a Sattvic person. Yeah. So a Sattvic Brahmana, a priestly person, isn't there sitting on the hill doing nothing. That's the mistake we made.
Are they?
Their intellect is so sharp that the execution of their actions percolates fully into.
But then they might, no, I absolutely, I agree with that.
But one thought, the sort of Brahmana we see today is that of somebody doing nothing. So we make the mistake of the idleness, the laziness, the tamas of the so-called birthright Brahmana. That's not a Brahmana. You're sitting in your place doing nothing, contemplating your neighbor, we often say. That's not a Brahmana. Unless you're totally out of the world. And that sort of Brahmana, where it's right at the very end, doesn't need the world. So yes, you're right. In some sense, we need Kshatriyas.
Yeah, I was just also thinking, sometimes we do need Kshatriyas because there might be experts in areas where, for example, priests or self-realized human beings don't have that expertise. So, for example, when it comes, I'm just giving this as an example. Let's say within the technology industry, like the fact that we're speaking right now over the Zoom company or using our laptops, maybe a self-realized human being wouldn't have the capacity or wouldn't have the skills or nor the time to, for example, be experts in design making and things. So I'm just thinking, for the sake of the society running, smoothly, it is to some extent good that there are skillful and experts within different domains or different industries, just for the sake of progression of society in a material sense, because we do live in a material world. And we do have to basically someone has to actually make this clothes. Someone has to make, the headphones that we're wearing, using. Someone has to make this company, someone has to make this coffee, or someone has to get. So what I'm saying is that, yes, there has to be a balance, perhaps to some extent. And I think that, yes, each individual or each person should be also responsible to cultivate more sattvic quality within themselves, but they still also have to live within this society to be able to survive and do some of the rajasic sense. Perhaps not, I'm not talking about the rajasic in the mindset, but rajasic in the action orientation sense. So they would have to deliver their work in order to be able to help the society or help humanity fulfill their needs. I guess I was just thinking from that perspective.
Look, it's like this. The richest and most wealthiest and most successful people do not want smartphones anymore. There's a reason for it. So we think that AI is helping us speed up our rajas. Is it really helping us evolve our stress, worry, and anxiety? You have to ask this question. That's the debate. So do you really think it's helping society? You have to make that debate and ask these questions. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no. If we didn't have Zoom, you would find me, I would find you, as we did.
So it makes it easier, the fact that I'm connecting with you right now. If it wasn't for Zoom, I probably wouldn't be here, or you wouldn't be here.
You would be in the location where I would be.
Well,
Every week, you would make sure you get out of your tamas and get into your sattvic thinking and get there because you wanted it. You would make sure that's the quality which we're trying to raise ourselves in. So every individual, you're right, the society is more rajas. It's actually tamasic. It's sort of rajas tamasic. It needs to up its rajas. I agree. But the sort of things we're getting into are not necessarily evolving society and doing them the service as we think it's so. It's making us more extroverted. It's giving us no time to think. If that's advancement in terms of quality of life, it was a good debate to have. I appreciate what you're saying. That's what's happening in the name of evolution. I'm not so sure. I would debate that with anybody who wanted to. But I do agree, whereas tamas is prevailing, rajas has got to be upped. So the Kshatriyas are better than the Vaisyas and the Shudras in terms of their content to actually act upon things. I agree with you. But to service, and that's what they would do, they service society in that sense. Agreed. And it would be good to have a few more of that. But you cannot stop there because it becomes that Rajas has a diminishing value. It's result orientated and it's fruit orientated.
yeah, so that's wrong. I mean,
so
I think
that what is the result of fruit and result orientation? What is the result to the individual? What would your answer be?
sorry, say that again, please.
So when you're result orientated, looking at the fruit, what's the result on the individual?
Well, it's not going to be so good. For example, you're going to experience a lot of stress and strain while you do the activity. So
what's the reason that one does anything in life? Anybody? What's the reason you want to do anything in life?
To grow. It can be materially or spiritually.
So
make society easy for others too. So to do something that's helpful for others, and whether it's spiritual, whether it's material. But I guess you're right. Like, I just want to reiterate this point that it's the mindset that I think speaks here the most to me, and to others perhaps, So I think while someone could be like Steve Jobs, or someone who could be like, an innovator, but it's also about, how, because they still, I think that, for the sake of society, we should still, be able to encourage, like things that make life easy for everyone to some extent. But at the same time, is where your thoughts are. Are you result orientated, or are you focused on the action itself? Because then one should cultivate sattvika also for themselves. So whilst one should be an innovator, because we need people to help us to, for example, someone has to go to Colombia and get coffee, for example, because we need it if some people who are coffee, or someone has to do such and such. But what I'm saying is that it's where your mindset.
So why do you just have what you've got in this country? What I'm trying to say is,
or even in this country, go and farm and get the ingredients from this country. I was just using that as an example. But I'm just saying everything in this world has to be done by an action. Like we live in the material world. Like someone had to sew the clothes that you're wearing right now. Someone had to, build the house in which you're living right now. So there is an element of action, but it's also, but what I'm saying is that what's important is that it's a sattvika quality that needs to be cultivated more, so that when one is doing their action, whatever it is, material, spiritual, they're not entangled by the result and the ego orientation that it is. So this should be cultivated, because we can't remove material from spiritual, live in a material world. We have to be able to live and survive and help and etc., etc. But it's where your thoughts rested. You know, are you too attached to?
So that's the
you know,
difference between a Kshatriya and a Brahmana. Yeah. So there's shades of grey in a Kshatriya and a Brahmana, you know, cultivating that momentum of Rajas. You've got to have that. You've got to actually have, you're right, you've got to have that Rajas momentum of action. And then it's got to start cultivating Sattva.
yes.
So you can't stop and say that's what it needs and not the Brahmanas. It actually needs more Brahmanas. So that, but to get to being the Brahmana, you've got to have that momentum.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it's, but you can never say it doesn't need more Brahmanas. And the ceiling shouldn't be the best of the Kshatriyas, because it will diminish. Yeah.
Yes.
Arjuna's a, you know, look at how it's been given. This whole Bhagavad Gita is for a person of action. It's designed for a person of action. And Arjuna, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, they're all Kshatriyas. So they're not, you know, basic people. They're people of qualities. Even on the baddie side, there are people of qualities. There's Drona, Bhima, like really refined people who are on the route to self-realization. That Kshatriya, which is on the route, they have sattva in them. They've still got that residue of to fight. So they have that rajas, but they've got that sattva in them. But the philosophy is being given to the Kshatriya to get out of the rajas, to get onto their vasanas, to pursue their vasanas, to finish them off, to get onto the sattva. You know, it's given to a Kshatriya, this knowledge. It's not being given to the Brahmana sitting there, as you think, doing nothing. It's deliberately given that way. So get onto your action. Don't sit around. Refine it. Do what you have to do. Get out of that rajas. But the society generally feels that there's nothing more than rajas. They don't. They exactly what you said. They don't feel we need brahmanas, because their example of brahmanas are sitting pretty, doing nothing. Yeah, or the other way around. But that's not a. Your dress doesn't make you the brahmana. Yeah, so it's not birthright. Tim, go ahead.
I appreciate Sam's point. I remember once someone saying it would be a funny old world if everyone was a professor. It just wouldn't work. But I think also you're saying, Paraji, that a Brahmana is also a Kshatriya and also all those other qualities. A Brahmana does not live in an ivory tower. Indeed, where is Krishna? He's on this chariot. He's involved in the Kshatriya world. So I think you're suggesting that a Brahmana has all these other qualities.
So it's like this, exactly. If you're a Brahmana, you realize there's a quarrel going on. You don't need to be involved. You don't get into the quarrel. But if it's your obligation in your set, you get in. It's as simple as that. Because it's only your clarity of mind is get in, get out. You're not getting into dwell in it. So the Brahmana may do things out of example, even just to pursue example. Remember, I told you the story of Swamiji cleaning the students' balcony. Swamiji doesn't need to get into campus cleanup. He's writing the literature for us to take. But why? To set an example for another to follow, to not be rigid, to think that I'm this, that ego, to break your ego. So he went and set the example for the student, which set the example for all of us. That doesn't indicate rajas because they're acting. That indicates a clarity of mind of how to set for others to encourage them to get out of their rajas. So, you know, Brahmana's not going to get in there. Brahmanas, in truth, the Brahmana with 80% sattva is not going to get into things unnecessarily, but they will too if it raises the bar, and that's their role. If it's not their role, they won't go near it. So to the extent they've got rajas still, they will get into it. So it's not that every Brahmana would get into something. It's not necessary. Like you were saying, there are few Brahmanas because there are few thinkers. Actual fact, how many, when you look at a Christ-like figure or Krishna or any of these figures who are to realized, you don't need many of them to have a whole, you've got a whole cult following of Hinduism, Christianity, Islam. They're all following Buddhism, they're all following personalities. There's only one of them. Whether they're following them with some rajas or sattva, it's a different matter. Some may not, but it's one figurehead. So you don't need hundreds to penetrate the world. But it helps if there's more. Every so often it's said there comes a spiritual master to raise society when it's at a low ebb. And then it moves out so society can get on with raising themselves. And when it goes down again, somebody will come again. Just masters, man, woman, to raise society. As a matter of fact, it's not that, this is what happens. We happen to be fortunate to have somebody like Swamiji raise the bar for us to look at this kind of knowledge. But so many are looking at it because of the work that he's done, which maybe he didn't have to do. So how many Kshatriyas are doing that? What is the necessity of your existence in this world is to gain peace and happiness. You've got to question what brings you that peace and happiness? Will more AI bring you that peace and happiness? You've got to question. It's a debate. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no. My little fun is UI or AI. Do you know what UI? Anybody know what UI might be? I've not said it. Universal intellect or artificial intelligence? You make the choice. But we need to get into Rajas where we're in Tamas. And we need leaders of that. But after that, you need leaders who are sattvic, who understand the value of it on both sides. Let's go. Good question. Because that's the general thought, which has a truth in it, as well as it's got a limitation. It does have an element of truth in what we're saying, but there's a limitation which should be spotted. Let's go.
कृषि गौरक्ष्य वाणिज्यं वैश्य कर्म स्वभावजं परिचर्यात्मकं कर्म शूद्रस्यापि स्वभावजम्.
Tim, if you could read the verse.
Verse 44. Agriculture, cattle rearing, trade are characteristic of Vaisya, born of his nature. And service orientation is the characteristic of Shudra, born of his nature.
So now we're talking about the Vaisya and the Shudra. So the Vaisya is the trader, the CEO, the admin person. 15% sattva, 60% rajas, 25% tamas. You know, these are numbers which I'm just picking out that Swamiji said to me. They're not set in stone. They're just to give us some, make a relevance to ourselves. So it may be here or there, you know, don't hold on to it just like that. But in the case of a Shudra, 5% Raja, 5%, sorry, let's start again. 5% Sattva, 10% Rajas, and 85% Tamas. So what does that mean? So they are service orientated, it says here, in the manner of physical service. They're not thinkers. So they will gracefully serve you. They're willing to serve you. They sort of like fix-it people. They can do all that. They feel, you know, they will do for you. But if you ask them to think about it, they can't. They can't think. It's too much for them. It's a headache. They get worried, or they're more subservient, the Shudras, in that sense. So, you know, I've experienced this in many different places. You know, when you go in India, it's very easy to see it, like the people in the household who work for you. They will serve you no end. But if you ask them to think about something, they'll run a mile. They get frightened. They can't do it. They won't do it, in actual fact. But they'd gladly do anything for you to make sure you're okay. Similarly, it was where I was staying in before where I am now. It was a closed environment, a compound. So there was security within the compound, and one particular person is still there for many, many years. Everybody there's about 200 flats in this compound in the middle of central London. And everybody asks the service of this one particular security chap, and he goes all out of his remit of the security. He does the shopping for them. He cares for the elder person. He goes to the bank for one person. He will come and get the handyman for you. He will make sure that everything is done in your place for you. He has served me no end, I can say, apart from the other 200 people in that compound. Above and beyond service, physical. Yet, if I ask him to come into my house, he cannot do it. He's too shy. He knows me very well for many years, even still I know him. If I need something done, he can do it. But if I ask him to think about something or come into my house, he's got a fear that he's overstepping his line. There's a subservience and a service there. And in actual fact, one of the people who lived in the flats there, an elderly person, had left everything in their will to him. But somebody meddled in between it and took what was rightfully left to him. He couldn't do anything at all because he's not argumentative. He's just physically service orientated. Very refined quality, very trustworthy, but cannot think above or beyond that. Cannot fight, cannot think, isn't aggressive, passively service. So even what's due to them. So if you give them something that they can manage, or ask them to fix something or do something to be helpful physically, they can do it. Vaisya. Sorry, Shudra. Vaisya is your CEO, your admin person. Always totally rajasic. It's going on. It's cutthroat, rajasic in business. They're business people, they're traders, they're materially orientated. They know how to manage. Our society globally is like that. It's based on the economy, the material. Very little sign of the, quite rightly, Sam, Kshatriya, never mind the Brahmana. If you talk to people about being Brahmin, Vayaha, it's fearful. It's like upside down, tamas. It's like, oh my God, we don't want those higher values. They will corrupt us. Higher values will make us not be greedy. Let's read it. Let's read it.
Vaisya deals in farming land and livestock, in commerce and business, whereas a Shudra takes to service, revealing subservience and submission, a characteristic opposed to lordliness of Kshatriya. A Shudra is more at ease to serve, take orders than to give. The Vaisya and Shudra also function according to their inherent nature or vasanas. Krishna repeats the word Svabhavajam, born of own nature, 5 times in 4 verses. It appears to emphasize that the caste system is based on individual vasanas, inner temperament, inherent nature, not on birthright, nor family background. Disregarding this clear pronouncement, laymen consider the caste system a social segregation.
So that's the unfortunate aspect. So it's the non-thinker will consider it like this. But if you see it in its entirety, it gives you, if you're a thinker, it gives you the license to go and think in the interest of the whole. If you're an active person, it promotes that side of it. If you're a Shudra, it promotes you to serve in that way gracefully. And then slowly your mind's calmed, you look at the next stage of things. Or if you have that element in you as any one of them and you need to do certain physical activities, it promotes it so that you can gracefully fulfill it. It's giving you an awareness of what's going on. So none is better than the other in a sense. It's just how you fulfill your vasanas. One may have a more pervasive capacity. A Brahmana has more pervasive capacity, but that capacity in its truest sense is never misused. You don't take advantage of people. You actually look in the interest of what's required to help raise society in the spiritual. Kshatriya helps raise society in the material. So the Vaisya and the Shudra quite, managing it, but they're not able to do the other side of it. So they need that, everybody needs that to do whatever. So nobody is better or lesser than the other when you understand the predicament. And sometimes, I've seen that when I've been going to India, many people will see the abuse and misuse, but you also see, when you examine it sometimes, the refinement of where nobody, whoever you are, is better than the other. Let's go. We're done. Hari Om.
Sorry, Palji, were you